This broadcast will start in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Voice of Stockton. For more information on The Voice of Stockton, go to thevoiceofstockton.org.
This is KBCC 89.5 FM, Tracy, California, Peace and Justice Network of San Joaquin.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS The Voice of Stockton or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
Gentlemen, and welcome to another amazing episode of the Phone Booth here on TVOSJ, the voice of San Joaquin. I'm your host, Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez.
Hello.
How you doing today, man?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing pretty good. Now, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with the show, maybe you're first-time listeners or viewers, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, The Phone Booth is a show completely dedicated to the world of pop culture. Anything from movies to video games to TV shows to comic books, you name it, and we'll do our very best to cover it. Now, today is a very special episode here on The Phone Booth. It is our second annual E3 special.
Yep.
Now, about a year ago, we had an episode that covered E3 2018. Now, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with what that event might be, E3 is the Electronic Entertainment Expo. It is like the central hub for all things video games, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have a little bit to talk about. We have our script, and I also have a separate list in case we want to tackle anything specific.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we kind of just want to sit down and talk to you guys about some of the events and also give our personal opinion on some of the new releases to come out within this event.
Yep. We already did the EA showing last week, so we'll be starting off with Microsoft, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, it seems to be tradition too. We start off with like EA in the previous episode and then tackle the rest in the next one, but it's always because EA seems to try and do things before everybody else, it seems. I think it's a little weird.
It's just the way the schedule ends up working out. EA usually goes first on a Saturday. We get, the next few on Sunday and then Monday. It's been that way for a while. It's just the way our schedule for the show works out against their schedule for E3.
Yeah, that's true. So, if you wanted our interpretation on anything that EA released during its little expo, EA Play 2019, be sure to check out our previous episode, our 1-year anniversary special for the Phone Booth, and we'll have a little bit of interpretation for some of the stuff to have come out. Now, of course, before we tackle E3, we are, of course, a show dedicated to pop culture, so we have a couple of other topics that aren't really involved in E3, but we still think would be very important to you guys. Now, this first topic, Brian, I want you to cover it because you care very deeply about this topic, and I think it's best that you explain to the audience what's going on with this.
Okay. So, unfortunately, Daredevil Season 3 has been ruled ineligible for their submission for Outstanding Stunt Coordination at the Emmys. The scene in question is an 11-minute-long, single-camera, single-take action scene of Matt Murdock escaping during a prison riot. Now, the reason it's been ruled ineligible is because while the scene is 11 minutes long, the cap for length for the eligible submissions is 3 minutes, which I argue is a dumb thing to have a cap on, because I really think that part of why the scene is so amazing is the cinematography, the choreography, all that's amazing, but the fact that they managed to pull off an 11-minute single-take action scene is truly amazing. And I think that deserves recognition, partially because of its length, because of how well it's done over such a long amount of time. I think that's part of what makes it so special, and having this sort of time restraint on it, I think, is going to exclude a lot of what could be pretty great action scenes in the past and in the future.
Yeah, it is a bit of a bummer that scene got, that it's not eligible. When you think about action movies, I always think about movies like John Wick, Matrix, The Raid, that kind of stuff that has their general action scenes. And there's a lot of good ones, but the fact that it's an 11-minute long fight scene, you don't get to see that very often. Even in the John Wick movies, where he gets into fight scenes with goons and the henchmen and the mercenaries and stuff like that, that usually sums up to about 5 minutes worth of action at most.
Yeah.
And even the long length action scenes, there's always a little gap that's not action. So the fact that they pulled it off, I didn't get to see the fight scene myself, but when I hear about it, it sounds very impressive, and it's a bummer that it can't be recognized in that kind of light.
Yeah, I'm hoping the Emmys will look at this and maybe change the rules for eligibility. Maybe make it so there is no time requirement on it. Because I hope a lot more shows try to do this in the future. Not just, to try to beat the record or because they can. But it was really fun to watch. And I encourage the viewers out there to go try to find it. If you have Netflix, you'll watch it there. It's probably on YouTube by now because it's been a while.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a bummer that I didn't get qualified. But, of course, we would recommend that people check out the fight scene because just the sheer scale of how long it is, it's impressive.
It's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the next little topic. Sci-Fi is reportedly planning a spin-off of their Krypton series based around Lobo. The alien bounty hunter is making his live-action debut in Krypton's second season, portrayed by Emmett J. Scanlon. Now, I'm excited for that, actually, because I really do enjoy Lobo. If you read his comic books, he's basically DC's interpretation of Deadpool from time to time. He's that joke character, the comedic relief, And I did get to see the trailer for Krypton where they did introduce Lobo and everything. And that actually made me want to watch Krypton just to see Lobo. Krypton itself, I'm not trying to throw shade, but it doesn't seem like a show that would really catch my interest. It seemed like one of those shows that saw how well Gotham was doing and figured, you know what, we could do that with Superman. But they can't do it with Superman.
Well, I've been looking at it, and some of the characters they have in it, apparently there's Lobo, there's Brainiac, there's Doomsday, there's Adam Strange, the time traveler, and through that they brought in General Zod.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of want to watch it now, because that sounds wacky in a way. I mean, Gotham got wacky towards the end, but it sounds like it sort of just hit the ground running with wacky.
Yeah, it really does sound wacky. I was interested when they talked about Brainiac, because when they brought up Brainiac, I was like, okay, that's an iconic Superman villain. And then I noticed that all these Superman villains seem to be popping up, but Superman's not even there. Mm-hmm. And that was the case with Gotham too. It was like all these big Batman baddies were popping up, but Batman wasn't really Batman yet, which made it weird,
Yeah, and to be fair, at least to Krypton, a lot of these villains they're introducing, like Lobo and Brainiac and Doomsday, all of these in the comics at points have existed before Superman, or not necessarily concurrently, like Lobo. He sort of existed as his own thing. And with General Zod being brought in, they brought him in through time travel, which is an aspect of the show they brought in with Adam Strange. It's not just, oh, look at all these Superman villains appearing, before Superman exists, like they kind of did with Batman and Gotham. It's more of a look at all these things that we have established existed before Superman and how they are sort of influencing the events that lead up to his, birth and everything.
Okay, well, I mean, I can get behind that, I guess. I guess I eventually do got to give it a watch then. Anyways, go ahead and take away the next little topic.
It has been announced the Phantasm, the eponymous antagonist from the Batman Master of the Phantasm animated movie, which is a great movie, is finally going to be making its DC Comics debut. Now, it's appeared in, comics based off Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, in the DC animated universe, but this will be its first time appearing in the main DC continuity. It'll be appearing in Tom King's upcoming Batman and Catwoman series in January of 2020, which itself will be a continuation of Tom King's current run on Batman, which has been cut short due to a variety of reasons.
Now, for those people out there who might not be too familiar with DC continuity, would you mind giving the audience a brief synopsis of who the Phantasm is?
Okay, so in the movie, the Phantasm is Andrea Beaumont, a figure from Bruce Wayne's past who becomes the Phantasm, a murderous vigilante who also has a bone to pick with Batman. And I'm keeping it vague Partially, so in case anyone wants to read the series, it's not spoiled, in case they keep it the same character. Partially because it has actually been a while since I've seen the movie, and I don't remember all the details of it.
Interesting. Kind of sounds a lot like a Red Hood kind of story. Somebody who knows Batman and everything.
Yeah, it was Red Hood, but it was years before they introduced Jason Todd's Red Hood into continuity. It's actually theorized that Phantasm is partially what inspired them to do Red Hood.
Interesting. Well, I'm definitely interested in seeing him pop up in the comic books. I'm afraid I didn't catch Batman Mask of the Phantasm, so I didn't really get to see that one. Though I did hear that it's been popping up again recently as like a DVD or something like that.
Yeah, it's also one of those movies they sometimes show late at night on like Cartoon Network, because they still, have the rights to Batman the Animated Series to just rerun it at times.
I didn't know they do reruns for Batman movies on Cartoon Network. I haven't really been seeing a lot of that lately.
They used to. I haven't watched Cartoon Network in a while, so this is based off, years ago. But I remember it used to, be one of those things they ran on Toonami when they didn't have a ton of anime on.
Oh, interesting. Well, I definitely got to give it a watch, and we of course would recommend that you folks give it a watch as well, seeing as the Phantom will be popping up in the Batman comics. Now, the last little thing we have to talk about here before we jump into E3, before we jump into trailer talk and then E3, is something that I kind of wanted to do a bit of a discussion piece on first, because it is kind of buzzing around right now in Hollywood. Dark Phoenix, the last installment of Fox's X-Men series, which has been branching along about 20 years now.
Yep, first one came out in 2000.
Ah, gosh.
19 years, yeah.
Man. Well, anyways, it would seem as though Dark Phoenix, even though it's supposed to be the ultimate end of Fox's run, has kind of ended on more of a whimper than a bang. It is not doing very well in box offices at all. In fact, last time I had checked, The Secret Life of Pets 2 had beat Dark Phoenix in the box office around the time of its release.
And the worst thing is that The Secret Life of Pets 2 was already underperforming what analysts expected of it, which was less than what they were expecting of Dark Phoenix. So an underperforming movie that was already supposed to make less money is doing better than Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
I've seen analyst reports saying it might lose $100 million.
Man.
Yeah.
It's bad. And I kind of wanted to look back on the X-Men series and kind of how it ended up where it's ended up at, Because when it first debuted, when the very first X-Men movie debuted, it was epic. It was the very beginning of the superhero movie genre for Marvel. They hadn't really even considered it branching out into a whole cinematic universe at that point in time, So it had so much going on for it, and you can't really help but wonder, where did it go wrong?
I think where it went wrong is probably where most people predict it did. It was at X3, The Last Stand.
The first Dark Phoenix interpretation.
Yes, where they got rid of director Bryan Singer, who we do not view favorably now.
Yeah.
And brought in Brett Ratner, who we never really viewed favorably, but even worse now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was written by Simon Kinberg, remember that name, and, oh god, I don't remember the name of the second writer. It was not only Simon Kinberg, though, it was a duo. And it did not do well, because it tried to cram in the Dark Phoenix saga as sort of a B-story to this larger mutant cure plot, which, with the Dark Phoenix saga, it's a saga. It deserves to be its own A-plot. You can't really just shove it into another movie just for the fan service. But they did. And it went really poorly.
Yeah.
Then they made X-Men Origins Wolverine, which somehow did even worse.
Somehow managed to ruin Deadpool for a minute.
Yeah, it led Ryan Reynolds on a crusade to try to fix what they did to Deadpool, which I say worked out pretty well.
Yeah,
so
pretty well.
2 years later, they canceled the 3 upcoming X-Men Origins movies about Magneto, Professor X, and Mystique, and merged them all into X-Men First Class, which was pretty good as a sort of prequel reboot. At that point, they kind of hadn't really decided what they were doing, and it was far enough back in time that they could sort of do what they wanted with the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, First Class was a pretty good X-Men movie. I mean, I think at that point in time, I hadn't really considered the idea of them doing time travel. I just saw First Class as the origin story of the X-Men, how they first founded and everything. And at that point in time, it was good, but I didn't really like have any idea of what was to come after that.
Yes, so then they did X-Men Days of Future Past, which I'd argue is the first really good X-Men movie they did since X2, which came out in 2003. Days of Future Past was 2014, so it took them 11 years, but they finally made another good X-Men movie. And this one was a crossover between the, original X-Men with Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and their first-class counterparts. Well, not for Hugh Jackman, because he played Wolverine in both, because Hugh Jackman. But it was really good. It also sort of reset the timeline, allowing them to sort of have carte blanche for the first-class timeline, so they could sort of do whatever they wanted and not have it be a retcon, but also alter the timeline enough for the upcoming Logan, so it would, so it would be a bit more fluid, so they could really do whatever they wanted with it. Really, the point of Days of Future Past seemed to be to get rid of this idea of a concrete timeline, so they could do things like, Deadpool takes place in its own timeline, Logan is its own timeline, First Class is its own timeline, so they don't really have to be tied down. Which, that's good.
Yeah.
I think when you have that many different sort of threads for a universe that can't quite tie together, I think just saying, you know what, we can do whatever we want is a fine solution.
It's a good little idea. I mean, it was kind of basically toying with time travel before Endgame started toying with time travel.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, I believe the first movie after that that was technically an X-Men movie was a Deadpool. No, wait, actually before Days of Future Past, the year before Days of Future Past, there was The Wolverine, which was another Wolverine-focused spin-off. This one being a sequel to The Last Stand that really didn't do too well and didn't go anywhere and really is only memorable because at the very end they set up some of what would happen in Days of Future Past.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in a deleted scene, they finally showed Wolverine's original X-Men costume, but he never put it on, and it was in a deleted scene, and it was never mentioned again.
That's disappointing.
It really, really was. It really was. They had, the mask and everything, and I thought, oh my god, Days of Future Past, they're going to have him wear this. And here, they did have him wear this, black with dark yellow on it in Days of Future Past, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we got Deadpool, which was good.
It was good.
It was
a Deadpool movie.
Yeah, it's hard to count the Deadpool movies as part of the X-Men franchise, because they are, but they're so separate they're not. It's sort of like the weird cousin that's more successful that shows up to family reunions. Yeah, they're a part of the family, but are they really?
Yeah, even the Deadpool movie itself took constant jabs at the fact that it was in the X-Men universe, but it also really wasn't in the X-Men universe. It's like they were never there.
So then we got X-Men Apocalypse, which, man, that was a bad movie.
I would only recommend watching it for the Quicksilver scene, because any Quicksilver scene is a good scene in my opinion. I just really love slow motion scenes.
And really, even I felt that one wasn't as good because it was just, they were very blatantly trying to copy what they had in Days of Future Past with that Quicksilver scene.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, X-Men Apocalypse was kind of just, wasn't the worst, but it was just so meh that it's hard to count as good.
Yeah.
Then we got Logan.
Great movie.
I think the best X-Men movie, mainly because it is really not an X-Men movie. Again, kind of like Deadpool. It's, it's a Western, really, with one or two guys that have superpowers.
Mm.
Then we got Deadpool 2. Again, good. Not quite as good as the original Deadpool, I'd say, but still very good.
And then there was also technically The Night Before Deadpool, which was like their attempt of a PG-13 version of Deadpool 2.
It was a re-edit of Deadpool 2. I really don't count it as a separate movie. I count it as a different, it's like a director's cut. It's the same movie, but it's a different version of it.
True. I mean, I only bring it up because they seem to demand that it's its own separate thing.
It's because they needed to re-release it in China.
Yeah. And then Dark Phoenix.
And I will come out and say I have not seen Dark Phoenix yet.
Me neither.
So maybe it's just the best movie of all time, and there's conspiracy among reviewers and everyone else who's seen the movie to try to kill it for some reason, which I have seen that theory on the internet, because it's the internet, and why wouldn't that theory be out there?
Yeah.
But so far, it is sitting at a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is the lowest of any piece of X-Men media since the first movie, including being lower than X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Last Stand.
Ouch.
The Last Stand, for reference, is currently at a 57%.
That's a big gap.
Yeah, I mean, even Origins Wolverine is at a 37%, 14 points higher.
Now, there are a couple of factors, supposedly, contributing as to why Dark Phoenix didn't do too well. One of the reasons being its release date. Originally, Dark Phoenix was supposed to be released sometime at around February, I believe February 22nd. They didn't want it to be a summer blockbuster superhero film. They wanted it to be a calm, detailed story film to release sometime around fall or spring. However, they ended up losing their release date in order for Alita Battle Angel to be released at that time, so it got pushed all the way over into June.
Yeah.
Another reason why the film supposedly didn't do too well was because the entire ending had to be reshot because it was way too similar to the ending scene of Captain Marvel.
Yeah, just for reference, the original ending scene was supposed to feature a superpowered female superhero flying into space, fighting off a fleet of shape-shifting aliens, which is almost bang on for what the ending of Captain Marvel was.
Basically. Spot on. And it was so similar that they had to rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was rumored that it was rewritten twice, but I haven't found anything about, like, a second rewriting or anything like that. But the fact that the ending got changed even once, it's bad.
Yeah.
That means that something you did in your story wasn't right, so you had to completely butcher your story to try and get it to work. And when you have to butcher your story to get it to work, it never works.
I hope in 5 years we get some sort of retrospective on the entire production of this movie, because it sounds like it was kind of a mess from the get-go.
I have a feeling we'll get information on the backstory of Dark Phoenix within 5 years, given how the internet likes to try and really dig deep into the behind the scenes of any flopped movie, really.
Yeah. Now, actually, Dark Phoenix is not the end of the X-Men Fox movies. There is one more coming. It's the end of the main timeline, but we still have New Mutants, the horror X-Men movie that has been pushed back from, I believe, a 2017 release date to now a 2020 release date, because it still hasn't had the reshoots it's had scheduled for years. And it's supposed to be, a horror take on X-Men. It's supposed to have some recognizable characters in it. I don't remember who off the top of my head, because there's been so little talked about of this movie for the last few years. Gonna have Maisie Williams in it.
Interesting.
So,
And you know what? And the only other X-Men thing that I can think of, aside from New Mutants, is the last season of Legion.
Which I think is currently airing, or is about to start airing.
It's about to start airing soon to FX, and it's supposed to talk more about Professor X creating Cerebro, and I guess Legion's trying to use time travel to reverse some kind of a crisis that he created or something.
Yeah, I want to watch Legion. Once it's over, I just want to watch it in one binge.
Oh, it is amazing. It is so hard to understand it, but then once you, analyze each episode, it's, way deeper than it was your first viewing.
Mm-hmm.
But we just wanted to talk about that. That seems to be buzzing all over right now. The Dark Phoenix is not doing well, and I wanted to talk about it because it baffles me, because it was hyped up to be such an amazing X-Men movie that to hear that it's doing worse than its past interpretation of its own story is just insane.
Yeah.
Anyways, that about does it for our weekly recap. So we're going to go into trailer talk. Now, we only have one trailer to talk about. For some reason, not many trailers have popped up. It's probably just because of the whole hype for E3,
And they're probably banking them for Comic-Con, because that's coming up in about a month.
Yeah, probably. However, we do have one trailer, and that trailer is the first one for Dr. Sleep. Its U.S. release date is November 8th, 2019. It's starring Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, Jacob Tremblay, and many others. The synopsis is that years following the events of The Shining, a now adult Dan Torrance meets a young girl with similar powers as his and tries to protect her from a cult known as the True Knot, who prey on children with powers to remain immortal. And it was directed by Mike Flanagan. One thing that I would like to point out from this trailer is I really dig the style of cinematography. I always like movies where it looks like, the room's shifting here and there. People are suddenly having to slide along the floors and stuff. I really dig that kind of stuff. Also, the trailer came across as very vague.
Yeah, I think they are trying to be vague because they don't want to spoil too much of the plot of what it is. Because this is, a sequel to The Shining. Well, it's hard to tell because of the history Stephen King has with the film adaptation of The Shining. For those of you that don't know, Stephen King hated Stanley Kubrick's Shining movie. He just absolutely despised it. It's so much so that he made his own TV series based off The Shining to be more book accurate.
Man.
Yeah, the TV show is very bad and does not... It wasn't good when it aired and it hasn't held up well.
Man, that's bad.
So this movie is billed as an adaptation of the Dr. Sleep novel, which was Stephen King's, direct sequel to The Shining. However, if you watch the trailer, there are just so many nods and there's so much inspiration taken from The Shining. I mean, you see the iconic carpet of the Overlook Hotel. You see room 237. They actually reused the elevator blood scene. Like, they recreated a lot of shots from The Shining, but they have admitted that they just reused the elevator blood scene. They even at the very end have the iconic Shining, Sting music to it.
Yeah, and they even showed, like, a clip from the original Shining where it showed Dan running around on the little tricycle, the toy trike going through the hotel and everything.
Yeah, they actually recreated that scene. It's not like they just lifted the footage.
Okay. And at the end of the trailer, he even shows up to the door that Jack Nicholson's character breaks through in the first Shining, which I thought was a really interesting nod right there. Even the way he pushes his face through the hole, the way Jack Nicholson did with his head and everything. It was just creepy.
Yeah, and it looks like Dan Torrance, he's now Dan Torrance, as an adult, he's still using The Shining. At the beginning, it looks like communicating with some entity through writing on his wall.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at one point, his wall says morning written in chalk, and another time it says, how are you? And then, at one point, Dan writes the word school in chalk on the wall, and the wall just sort of explodes outward, and all the words are replaced with red rum.
Mm-hmm.
Which implies, and there is a reveal in the book I don't want to spoil here that I think this is connected to, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay.
But I am actually very interested in this because it is both an adaptation of a book written by an author who hated the movie adaptation of its predecessor, but it's also a sequel to that predecessor in a way. So it's
an interesting take.
Yeah, and actually the original actor who played Danny Torrance as a child, who is actually now a professor of biology, has commented on it and saying they have tried very carefully to walk the line between Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King here, and he thinks they've done a good job.
Ooh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, I highly suggest y'all check out that trailer. The movie looks insane. Definitely a really good psychological thriller, which is definitely something right up my alley. I love psychological thrillers, So, again, the release date is November 8th, 2019, so mark your calendars. And that about does it for trailer talk, and now it's time to get into the real juicy part of today's episode, to go into our E3 recap. Now, of course, we decided to pick out of the bunches, because as any of you know, if you follow E3, there is a huge list of games that we could go on, and last time we tried going through the entire list, it took us almost 2 hours to get our show done, which was insane.
Yeah, we cut out games that have either already been announced, like some of the stuff from the Microsoft and Ubisoft conferences, some of it that was just, new content for games that have already been released. And sometimes there are games we're just not that interested in. Like, there were some remasters announced that, okay. And ultimately, we just didn't have anything to say about them, so we decided to cut them.
Right. So, without further ado, let's get into our E3 recap. And we're going to start off with Microsoft. And the first little thing to pop up is Cyberpunk 2077. Now, if you're familiar with, if you've seen any of our past episodes, we've been talking about this. Cyberpunk 2077 is a open world, first-person game. I don't even want to say a first-person shooter because there's way more options than just a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
It's like a... can't really describe it too well. It's like
It's a cyberpunk game. It's based off the game that gave the name to the genre of cyberpunk.
right, a game where you have an infinite number of options, it seems, to do just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But recently a new trailer dropped, and we only really wanted to mention it because of the fact that they decided to use Keanu Reeves, like his actual personage, as a character in the video game as Johnny Silverhand.
Mm-hmm. Johnny Silverhand is a character from the actual cyberpunk tabletop games and books who appeared a lot in Cyberpunk 2020 and 2013 and all those games. And now in 2077, it's hard to tell what form he's appearing in, because 2077 is a sequel to 2013 and 2020. It takes place, 57 years after 2020 does. Mm-hmm. So it's... In the trailer, he sort of has this shimmer effect at the very beginning, so it's implied maybe he's invisible, maybe he's a hologram, maybe he's, a projection of your mind. There was actually an interview with the creator of Cyberpunk who talked about voodoo and the spiritualism of ghosts and that. So maybe he's a ghost. Who knows? Maybe he's still alive, because they also pointed out that in the world of Cyberpunk, you can just sort of keep modding yourself to keep yourself alive indefinitely.
Interesting. Now, of course, that was just the trailer, and it did give a little bit of extra context as to the story and your main character's significance, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But we also wanted to talk about it because of one fan at E3 who just so happened to get himself a free copy of Cyberpunk 2077 for the nicest reason possible.
Yep. So at the end of the Cyberpunk trailer, after they revealed, Keanu Reeves is in this game, they had Keanu walk out on stage, and he was just sort of gushing about this game, talking about how beautiful it looks, talking about how it's breathtaking. And one fan responds, "You're breathtaking." And Keanu, without missing a beat, turns, points to the fan, and says, "No, you're breathtaking." And that fan apparently now has a free copy of Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes out, because Keanu Reeves called him breathtaking.
Isn't that awesome, though? You get a free copy of this game for complimenting somebody who definitely deserves that compliment. Mm-hmm. That is the nicest thing I have ever heard of at E3. That's so cool. Anyways, though, we have to move along. Next one is Bleeding Edge, Ninja Theory's new melee-focused hero game.
Yeah, it's most people are calling it a hero shooter in the vein of Overwatch, where you select a character with a set moveset and it's a 4-player PvP. But I'm trying not to call it a hero shooter, because they didn't show gameplay, but they showed a pre-rendered trailer where they focus on the fact that it's melee combat. And since there's not really a term for it outside of hero shooter, I've just been calling it hero game, which is actually, now that I think about it, really vague. I may have to take that name back to the editing room. I don't know what I was trying to say there. I'm very tired. Anyway, it looks fun.
Oh yeah, anything that's Ninja Theory is usually pretty fun. They're pretty good when it comes to their combat mechanics in their video games. It's always fun to play. I've had a bad reputation of having to deal with the counters, though, for Ninja Theory games. More particularly, I believe, I want to say Ninja Gaiden. Isn't that Ninja Theory? No, that's Team Ninja. Never mind. I'm thinking something different.
No, they did DMC Devil May Cry, which was the reboot one, which people had mixed opinions about. They then did Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which I've heard is very good and was impressive because it was sort of a game with almost AAA budgeting without a publisher. So they managed to pull that off, which I think is neat. But now they've been bought by Microsoft, and this appears to be their first, Microsoft-owned project.
Interesting. So that sounds pretty good. The next one that they did was 12 Minutes, developed by Luis Antonio.
Yep, one guy.
And it is a game where your character is stuck in a 12-minute time loop trying to save your wife.
Yes.
Now,
so it's essentially Groundhog Day if it was a murder mystery. They start out with a man telling his wife that someone's about to knock on the door and is going to hurt her, and she doesn't believe him because, from her point of view, there is no time loop. But eventually the man breaks in and kills her. The husband tries to kill him but ends up getting killed, and the time loop restarts. And it seems like the 12 minutes takes place in real time, and it's all about trying to figure out a way out of the situation with what you can find in these rooms in 12 minutes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I'm definitely curious as to trying out the mechanics for this game because I just love certain games where you have to solve a puzzle under a specific time limit. One of my favorite games that I used to play that was available on the PSP was a Half Minute Hero, where it was another puzzle game where you had literally only 30 seconds to try and solve the puzzles and survive, or else you had to restart from the beginning and everything. So I like the idea of being able to play a game on a time limit, even though most of the time limits just are not very fun on most games. As we pointed out before the show started, the Dead Rising franchise has been a clear example of why people just don't like time limits.
Yeah, I think when a time limit is applied on top of a game, it's bad, but when the entire concept and gameplay of the game is around a sort of like this repeating 12-minute loop, I think that could be fun. And I'm actually really looking forward to this one.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, the next thing to talk about is the brand new DLC for Forza Horizon 4.
Now, we said we weren't going to talk about add-on content, but we broke the rule for this one, because, tell them what the content is, Ed.
It's Legos!
It's Legos.
We have Lego cars now, people!
In the hyper-realistic, tuned to look as close to real life as possible, Forza Horizon 4. We have Lego cars.
With the song Every Day is Awesome playing in the background. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I can't get over that because that's so cool. I remember they had car kits for Lego, and they probably still do now, but I never thought it'd pop up in a Forza game.
They also did that classic Microsoft E3 thing of every year Microsoft brings this big, expensive, $2 million McLaren car out on stage, and they toyed with us because they had it, veiled in shadow until they showed the trailer, and then they brought up the lights, and it's a McLaren car made of Lego. Apparently 500,000 pieces.
Oh my god, it's insane. I kind of want to try it out now just to drive around in Lego cars. I really hope that if I crash, like, bricks fly off or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. This DLC has made me consider buying Forza Horizon 4.
I thought it was funny that in the trailer, like, you have, your regular Forza car kind of just pull up and wait for a second, and then all these Lego vehicles come by, and it's a slow-mo of that exact car made of Legos, and it's just a little mini figurehead smiling at you through the window and everything. And
they showed, like, tracks that are partially made of Lego now, scenery that's made of Lego. So you've got the image of, again, a hyper-realistically detailed McLaren pulling up in front of a Lego house.
Yeah, oh my god, it's hilarious. Anyways, I'll let you handle the next couple of bits here on the list, because I've been talking about a good number of them.
Okay, so the next one I wanted to talk about is Phantasy Star Online 2. Now, this is not a new game. This game came out in 2012. It is a Japanese MMORPG, but it is finally coming to the West on the Xbox, and I believe they also said it would come to Switch at some point. And I just wanted to point out, because Sega, the publisher and developer of this game, said they wanted to bring this game west after its launch in 2012. That was 7 years ago. It's taken them 7 years to bring it to the West. And I mean, when it launched, they said it's going to have all its content, so that's like 7 years of content for new players, so that's good.
Oh, yeah.
It's 7 years. Okay, and next is Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga.
Because Lego Star Wars is still apparently a thing.
Yeah, it's still a thing. This game is going to have all 9 movies in it, as opposed to the last one, which only had The Force Awakens, or the games that had 3 or 6 movies. This one will have all 9. Not sure about the spin-offs. They didn't say anything about that. But it looks good. It's got better graphics. Apparently it will be voice acted, which is actually a point of contention with some Lego fans.
In my opinion, the Lego games got a little bit better when they started adding in the dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, as fun as it was when they were just little minifigures, you kind of lose interest when everybody's just constantly going, stuff like that.
And see, I agree with voice acting for, like, their original story games, like, the Lego Batman games where they sort of make their original stories, or the Lego City Undercover. But with things like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and the Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're really just parodying already established movies that they've kind of expected people to watch, I think it's better if they have just sort of the grunting and slapstick, because you already know what's going on there,
yeah.
And they're trying to parody it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, I guess. Anyways, let's talk about the Game Pass.
Game Pass. So they announced Xbox Game Pass for PC and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Now, Game Pass for PC we actually talked about a little while ago, a few weeks ago, as Microsoft announcing, Game Pass for PC. It'll have a different selection of games. And yeah, they launched it at E3, and they also announced Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which is a combination of Game Pass for the Xbox, Game Pass for the PC, and Xbox Live Gold. Which they are actually offering for a limited time offer for the first month for $1.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna go pick that up.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was good to follow up on this, because Game Pass is really the best thing Microsoft has contributed to this generation. Because Microsoft really hasn't done well this generation of gaming.
Yeah.
The Xbox One landed with sort of a thud, and they never managed to recover from that. They never had a good selection of first parties. But what they do have is they just sort of introduced this concept of Netflix for games. And several other companies are following in suit, which we'll talk about a little later.
Mm-hmm.
They also talked about Project xCloud, which is going to be Xbox's game streaming service. They didn't really go too much into it other than it's going to be, game streaming, but they also said you could turn your Xbox into a game server for free.
For free.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So you could, turn your Xbox into a server and host games on it with your friends, I guess. Again, they didn't go into a ton of detail. I'm guessing they're holding back until the next thing we are talking about is released, which is Project Scarlet. The next generation Xbox console. Some of the specs are it'll have 120 FPS, which
not
is
bad.
Yeah, considering current gen games on console are about 30.
Mm-hmm.
8K resolution, again pretty good, though there aren't a lot of TVs that support 8K at this point. So
I didn't think about that.
I think they're sort of betting on that becoming more popular as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
It'll have an internal solid state drive, which is great for load times. They actually made a big focus on load times in the presentation for it. They wanted to cut those down, which I'm all for.
Oh, yeah.
And real-time ray tracing, which is a lighting technique that is not currently on any console, because it's sort of brand new, and it just renders light incredibly realistically. There are lots of videos out there of Minecraft with ray tracing on it, and it just makes it look absolutely beautiful. So I think, I don't know if it's going to be the next big thing, but I think it is going to be a part of games going forward that are at least trying to look realistic. They showed it in Minecraft. It completely disrupts the art style of Minecraft, even if it does look good. But I think games that are, trying to use it as part of the art style will look amazing.
Well, that's good. I've been a little bit iffy on Project Scarlet. I heard a little bit of specs on the PlayStation 5, but as far as Scarlet goes, I hadn't really been able to hear too much about it.
Yeah, PlayStation 5 actually has some similar specs to Scarlet. Ray tracing, 8K resolution. There were rumors of a solid-state drive as the internal hard drive. Mm-hmm. Nothing on the frames per second yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it hits 122.
Oh, yeah. So, definitely going to have some really good next-gen consoles coming out once they're released.
Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to that. Now, let's talk about Bethesda's conference.
Yeah,
Bethesda does so well with their E3 so far, haven't they?
I'm going to come out and say we cut 80 or 90% of the conference out because there was just so much nothing. But we do have two things. Bethesda gave us two things worth talking about this year. First of all is Fallout 76 Battle Royale. Now, it's technically called Nuclear Winter, but it is a 52-person Battle Royale. Because of course. Because of course this trend-chasing game that is terrible has to have a Battle Royale now. Why not just chase all the trends, Bethesda? Just chase all of them.
Can't you at least fix your game first before you even try and toss in a whole new game mode?
Nope.
Your system is still rigged for first-person shooters. Come on now.
Also, they got applause at the press conference when they announced they're adding human NPCs to the game. That thing that's been in every Fallout game except for this one? They got applause for that. Someone cheered for that they're adding the bare minimum to their franchise game. I always hate the audiences at E3 because they're just so packed with fanboys. And I guess, yeah, that's going to be the people that buy tickets to these things. But there are also journalists in those audiences that are cheering for things like pre-orders and adding human NPCs. And to any journalist that cheered for that, shame on you.
Hey, they probably had to force themselves to cheer, or else Bethesda would kick them out for actually pointing out any flaws in the game. 'Cause I have a feeling that's how the Bethesda team was during that whole presentation.
Yeah, So yeah, Fallout 76 Battle Royale, it's also currently having a free week of the game, but that started back on Monday, so it's really free 2 more days. I downloaded it and tried it, got bored after 15 minutes of playing. Yeah.
That's not good.
No, considering that when I first loaded up Fallout 4, I played it for about 8 hours straight.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the next little thing on Bethesda's list.
See, this actually looks good. It's Doom Eternal, which was actually announced at last year's E3, but with only a pre-rendered trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got quite a bit more, and it actually seems to be going harder in on the story and lore of Doom, which is somewhat controversial, because past Doom 3 tried to do that. Didn't work out so well. But it looks like they are expanding on the lore, but not while sacrificing the gameplay.
Yeah.
The gameplay looks better than ever. They've added a bunch of new tools. There's a grappling hook. There's a lot more mobility options. The levels are packed and vertical. There's a bunch of guns. I mean, it's Doom. If you played Doom 2016, imagine that, but more of it.
Yeah. Now, I'm a little iffy when I hear that they want to focus more on the story, because one of the cool things about Doom was that Doom Guy didn't care about what was going on in the world. There even made a reference to it in Doom 2016, where like there's a moment where like you think Doom Guy is gonna start listening to the story, and he just straight up pushes the screen aside, like, nope, I don't care. I'm gonna go kill some demons now.
Yeah, and when I say there's more focus on the story, I mean they made you listen to one guy talking about the story at one point during the entire presentation, and that's how there was more focus on the story. Now, the lore is being expanded as the first Doom reboot, Doom 2016, took place on Mars and in Hell. And this one will take place on Mars, in Hell, on Earth, in Heaven, and in a place called the Home of the Sentinels, which, if that's part of the Doom lore I don't know about, sorry, but that sounds new.
Yeah, definitely sounds interesting. I mean, anybody who's a huge fan of the Doom games, from what I've seen in the gameplay trailers, it looks pretty good.
Looks like you get to fight angels now, which is gonna piss off a whole lot of people.
But it's Doom Guy, what can you do?
Yep.
So, that was Bethesda's press conference. Next up on our list is Ubisoft. And we have 3 games to talk about here on Ubisoft. Let's start off with Watch Dogs Legion.
Okay, so Watch Dogs Legion is the third game in the Watch Dogs series. This one takes place in a post-Brexit London. Wait for them to try to say that's not political in any way. And the main gimmick of the game is you can play as any NPC you find. You can take control of them and bring them into your Legion, which is your sort of hacker collective. And like one of the examples it showed is you can take over this little granny NPC and go on missions as her, which, you have her vaulting over areas, you have her attacking guards, you have her shooting guns. It was apparently, if you wanted to, you could compose your Legion entirely of little old ladies and grannies.
That sounds like the greatest thing ever. It reminds me of Fallout New Vegas, where you end up getting attacked by that mob of old ladies with rolling pins.
Yeah. They also apparently have made the game a lot deeper in how you can follow like enemies around. Like, one example was you break into a place, you knock out an enemy, you can track that enemy as they're taken by ambulance to the hospital, you can hack into the hospital records and have them euthanized.
Oh my god.
Which is really, really dark. I'm not gonna lie about that. That is a lot darker than I thought that story was gonna go.
Yeah.
But it is an impressive level of world consistency, because usually in these types of games, you knock out, random guard in area, and they despawn and you never see them again. These NPCs, these guards have, they actually have character to them in that you can follow them and psychotically murder them after you've knocked them out in their hospital. But oh my god, that's dark.
It's so dark.
Okay, the next one is Gods and Monsters, which we didn't see a lot of. However, it's being worked on the same team that worked on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and it's been described as The Legend of Zelda, but with Greek mythology, which I am all in for.
That definitely sounds interesting. Kind of sounds like that was what Assassin's Creed Odyssey was basically ramping up to, because I heard a lot of people mention that Odyssey was just really got rid of the whole this is historically accurate kind of thing.
Oh yeah, there was the Minotaur. They're bringing Atlantis in DLC. They've given up on historically accurate, and I think that's great. And I do like that essentially they use Assassin's Creed as a testing ground for, other game ideas like Assassin's Creed 4. That team went on to work on Skull and Bones, which is, all in on the pirate naval combat aspect of that game. And now we've got the people working on the Greek mythology from Assassin's Creed Odyssey making their own game out of that.
Nah, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty interesting way to use Assassin's Creed as, this ongoing series, but also sort of a testing ground for other game ideas that you can expand on.
Kind of a template for other projects. And I find it interesting, especially with Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, how they kind of just mentioned that Abstergo is now a video game company, so it makes it even more kind of funny to think of. One thing that isn't funny, though, that I'm kind of upset that we have to talk about is the new version of Uplay, the bane of any AC player.
Yeah, okay, so Ubisoft announced Uplay Plus, which is essentially their version of Xbox Game Pass. It is a subscription service for where I think it's $14 a month. It's only for PC and the upcoming Google Stadia, but you will have access to a suite of Ubisoft games, including the upcoming Watch Dogs Legion, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, the already released Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And it's really just their version of Game Pass or EA's All Access thing that they've had. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Uplay still isn't great, so I'm kind of disappointed they seem to be doubling down on this. I hope this means they're going to maybe do a relaunch of Uplay as something usable and good.
Hopefully.
And usable.
Hopefully. We can only hope. But that was Ubisoft's little E3 thing and the ones that we found interesting. Next up on our list is Square Enix. And I would like to talk a little bit about the trailer we had gotten for the remake of Final Fantasy VII. Now, of course, this has been hyped immensely. It has been talked about for almost a whole year now. I want to say even 2 years, it feels.
It was the first trailer for it released at E3 2015?
Yeah, so long ago. And then there were so many rumors as to what it was going to be. And then we finally got the trailer. And gosh, I really hate to say this, but I'm not really excited.
I'm interested in it mainly because I don't know. I never played the original Final Fantasy VII, mainly because the version I got for PC was not in any way optimized to be played on PC. I'm interested. It uses the same battle system, essentially, from Final Fantasy 15, which I loved, even though it was, again, a hot mess. It's real-time action button mashing, but then you can freeze time to use abilities and spells and items.
Yeah. One thing that I can say is that the boss fights look fun. I would definitely want to play it just to go through all those boss fights again. It actually looks like the boss is messing with the environments, because PlayStation 1 tried their best to be immersive, but it was a PlayStation 1. There wasn't really too much you could do. But now they really can make it look like this whole area is like an actual battlefield, not just you two spawned into this random area.
Yeah, and it's a different style of game. Final Fantasy was a turn-based game where you all your characters are on one side and the boss is on the other, and you take turns hitting each other. There's not really any interaction with the environment. While this is, a third-person action beat-em-up game with some turn-based elements.
Right. But I mean, any of you Final Fantasy lovers out there, you're definitely going to love the new Final Fantasy VII that's coming out. That is definitely obvious.
We got our first looks at Tifa and Sephiroth in the new engine. They both look great. And we got a bit more explanation about the release structure of the game, because it's been kind of up in the air. It was originally going to be one game, and then it was said it was going to be episodic.
And then it was going to be like 5 discs.
Yeah, so what they've said is that there will be multiple games, but they've expanded upon certain areas of the game so much they deserve their own games. Like, the first game will take place entirely in the Midgar section of the game, which is about the first quarter of it, from what I've heard. But they've expanded it so much and added so much new content that it really does justify being its own game. I can't speak to that. That's just what Square Enix is saying. They've said there's enough content on it to fill 2 Blu-ray discs, which is a lot.
That is a lot.
That is a lot of content. and it will be coming out, what was it, April of 2020, I believe?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about Dragon Quest XI.
Okay, so Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S is coming to the Nintendo Switch. And I really just wanted to yell about this because it has taken 2 years for Dragon Quest XI to come to the Switch since launch, even though it was the first game announced for the Switch. It was announced before it was even called the Switch, back when it was called the NX.
Oh man, I forgot those days.
Yeah, back before the big reveal event where we really knew what it was, when people were theorizing it was, going to be this and that and all these crazy things. Square Enix announced Dragon Quest XI was coming to the NX. And now it finally is. 2 years later.
Here it is.
Yeah, I'm not mad that it's finally coming. I'm just mad that it's taken so long, given that it was, again, one of the first games announced for the system.
Yeah, well, at least it's out now.
Yeah.
People will be able to play it on the Switch, which
Yeah.
is good.
Actually, I don't know if it's out now. I think it's coming out in a few months.
Yeah, it's gonna be out in a few months, but
Yeah.
at least it's finally gonna be out. Now, the last piece on the Square Enix presentation that we wanted to talk about was the Avengers game that's coming out. Now, this is not to be confused with Ultimate Alliance 3. That is also a thing that is coming out, but this is a separate game, completely separate with its own story and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of see the Big Five. It's kind of hinted at being a Big Six, but there's a gaping problem in the trailer that we'll get to later on. But we see the Avengers base. It starts off with them going to a convention, and people are able to meet the Avengers and talk to them and everything. And then some kind of disaster happens on, I want to say it was the Golden Gate Bridge or the Queen's Bridge or something along those lines.
Yeah, the story is that the Avengers are opening their West Coast branch on this brand new helicarrier powered by a Terrigen reactor. And then the Taskmaster breaks onto the helicarrier to try to steal the reactor. Something goes wrong. There's some sort of disaster that ends up destroying San Francisco. The Avengers are blamed, Captain America is dead, and the Avengers have been either disbanded or gone into hiding. It's hard to tell.
Mm-hmm. But eventually they do come back together to try and deal with some unforeseen threat. I don't think I really got to see who the penultimate villain is in the game.
Yeah, they didn't show it.
Yeah. But one thing that I wanted to point out, because plenty of fans have been getting upset about this, surprisingly enough, is that people want to know where Hawkeye is.
Okay, so for reference, they have taken what are essentially the main six of the Avengers from the movies. You've got Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, and Black Widow, but no Hawkeye. And all these characters are very much designed after their movie appearances, and it's very obvious that they chose these characters based on the fact that they're in the movie. But there's no Hawkeye. I mean, even, the advertising materials where they have all the logos of each Avenger, it's only for the 5 Avengers. And at one point in the trailer, they show that Hank Pym is there. He's not in suit as Ant-Man, but it looks like he's testing out experimental shrinking techs. And they did say that they will be adding more characters as DLC as the game goes on. But still, it just feels so weird that you are so obviously basing this off the movie roster, but then you cut one. I mean, people in the auditorium during the presentation were yelling, "Where's Hawkeye?"
Man.
I was yelling at the screen, "Where's Hawkeye?"
And I was as well. And it's kind of funny how big of a deal this is being made. It started off as just a joke, where's Hawkeye? But then people are legitimately asking now, where the heck is Hawkeye in this video game? But, aside from that one little bit, the trailer looked great.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we always have to be careful because this is E3 we're
Yeah.
talking about, and I believe it was saying that it was like in-engine footage or something along those lines.
Yeah, it was an in-engine cutscene, which doesn't really mean anything. It might as well just be completely pre-rendered. We did get to see some gameplay, but it was apparently even during the demos behind closed doors, it was all controlled by Crystal Dynamics. They didn't allow members in the demo to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically an arena hero brawler. You fly in as Thor, or jump in as Captain America. You beat up a bunch of enemies in this one area. You move on to the next one. Do the same. You can switch between. Well, we don't exactly know the switching mechanic. You can play as at least 5 different Avengers at launch, and again, they'll be adding more as DLC. It's unclear how, if in story missions you can switch between Avengers, or if you're locked into certain ones, if you can choose one at the beginning, or... It's not open world. which they made a big point about. It will not have loot boxes, but it will have microtransactions of some sort.
I mean, all in all, it doesn't look like a bad game. I kind of do hope to see Hawkeye in the future, but aside from that, it looks good, and I think people will enjoy it once it comes out.
I think it's a little underwhelming, especially with the hype they've been building for it.
Well, I mean, I guess that's fair. I'm interested in the story, at least.
Yeah, maybe it'll be great when it comes out, but right now it hasn't showed anything to really wow me.
Fair enough. Now, that was the Square Enix Expo, and we have one last expo to talk about before we wrap up the show, and it would be the Nintendo Expo, which I'd like to argue probably won E3 this year, I want to say.
Nintendo's always good at E3. I don't remember the last time they had a bad presentation, even back when they were doing actual conferences instead of the directs.
They've always kind of been doing pretty good. So let's talk about some of these. Now, I'm going to let you talk about the first two.
Okay, so Animal Crossing New Horizons will be the next mainline Animal Crossing game releasing on the Switch. Now, it was supposed to be releasing in 2019, but they pushed it back to March 20th, 2020 for basically, they said the reason was so they could not force their employees into crunch time, which I think is a good reason to delay a game. I'd support a lot more games if they were willing to delay them to, give their employees a life.
Definitely.
So the new game will follow pretty much the same setup, except this time you're on an island. And you don't start out with a house, you start out with a tent. Ooh. But Tom Nook still comes along and somehow hands you a bill for 47,000 bells because of all the transportation costs.
Dang it, Tom Nook.
Yeah, and they actually frame it. They realize how much fans hate Tom Nook. So they sort of do portray him as a jerk in this one. The mechanics, very much the same. It's an Animal Crossing game. They do sort of follow in the tradition of the... what was the last 3DS one? The one where you were the mayor of the town. I don't remember the name. But you have a lot more control over the town itself now. They show you, digging paths to specific areas, putting down public amenities, planting trees here and there, which you could do in earlier games. But they seem to be giving you a lot more control, which I am all in for that. One casualty of modernization in games is the game now has an autosave feature, which unfortunately means Mr. Rossetti the Mole, who used to yell at you if you turned off your game without saving, has been laid off.
That actually has been announced. That's actual news right now.
And the game's producer has said that they are looking for a new job for him within the Animal Crossing town, but as of right now, he has been laid off from his position of yelly mole man that yells at kids when they don't save the game properly.
Shame. Now, The Witcher 3 is coming to Switch, yeah?
Yep, Witcher 3 Complete Edition is coming to Switch. There has been a significant graphical downgrade, whereas it ran on, PS4 and Xbox and PC at, 1080 or even 4K after a patch. Docked on the Switch, it will run at 720p, but if you have it in handheld mode, it will be 540p, which is... That's pretty rough, especially for such a detailed graphically game as Witcher. The Witcher is gorgeous. And 540p, I'm guessing it's not just like a graphical downgrade. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot less going on in the background too. Probably a lot fewer NPCs that sort of bring the world to life. Well, I do think it's nice that maybe people with only a Switch will get to play the game. I don't recommend it if you were thinking about buying it on another console. I'd say buy it on another console or on PC, because this version is just not going to give you the full Witcher experience.
Fair enough. But, I mean, at least there's another way to play Witcher 3, I suppose.
Yeah.
Now, the next game we want to talk about is the third installment of the Luigi's Mansion series. Now, this one I find to be a little bit interesting because, as you pointed out, Luigi's not even in a mansion in this one. He is in a very elegant-looking hotel.
Yep, in a very diverse and complicated hotel. At one point, they showed a movie set, and I think there was an aquarium in this hotel.
Yeah, and apparently there are some ghosts that people just normally interact with. At the beginning of the trailer, we see a little ghost dog playing around with Luigi and gang and everything. And then the usual thing happens. Everybody disappears. Luigi wakes up one night, scared as heck. Ghosts are there. And he pulls out his handy-dandy little I forget what they call it. I want to say it was a proton pack, but I know it's not. It's like a special vacuum cleaner.
It's some complicated, not the Ghost Vac. It's a very complicated name that I don't remember. It's an EGAD name. EGAD made it. It's never going to be simple.
Yeah, but this one is a double O version, meaning that it's come with a lot of extra mechanics that you can use. There is a suction version where it shoots out like a toilet plunger, and then if you connect that to your vacuum, you're able to slam that object into other places. There is an air blast mode, so if you get surrounded by ghosts, you can shoot a blast of air into the ground and knock all the ghosts away from you. And then there's also the latest mechanic, which me and Brian both find endearing, Gooigi. Why don't you talk to him about Gooigi?
Gooigi is Luigi made out of goo, which you can control him to get into places Luigi can't. Like, he can slip through bars, he can go down drains. And it's Gooigi.
It is Gooigi. And a cool thing about it is that with Gooigi, you're now capable of accessing multiplayer. You can get another person to jump in and play as Gooigi while you yourself run around as Luigi. Though the game also made it very evident that as Gooigi, you want to try your best to stay away from water because, as they made it clear, Gooigi and water do not mix well.
They don't.
You see him walk near a drain that has water in it, and he just kind of dissolves into the drain and everything.
Also, according to an interview with one of the game's producers, Gooigi is not edible. So don't try to eat Gooigi.
Really?
That was a question fans had. It was, is Gooigi sentient, and is he edible? And they really dodged around the sentient thing, which is concerning, but he's not edible.
Okay.
Also, there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Oh, right, you can grab ghosts and hit other ghosts with them, thanks to the suction feature.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You can, like, suck up a ghost and then just wail on another ghost with the ghost, and I found that entertaining.
Yeah, same mechanic as the suction cup function that his Proton Pack has. But of course, it's gonna be a very fun game for anybody who's interested in the Luigi's Mansion series. I'm personally excited for it. You gotta love Luigi's little adventures here and there. But anyways, let's move on to a new challenger in the Smash Bros. Tournament. Actually, there were two new contestants introduced to the Smash tournaments.
The first one was the Hero from Dragon Quest, which is really just sort of a bunch of different heroes from the various Dragon Quest titles, because there have been so many. We saw one from 11, we saw, I think, with the one from 5. I'm not sure if it's like they're just different skins like you can have in the game, or if maybe they're all different characters that play differently, or if they're like the Pokemon trainer from Brawl, where you choose different heroes that have different abilities to do the fighting for you. But the big one, the one fans are really happy about, is Banjo and Kazooie.
Woo woo!
Yep, the mascots from the old school Rare games are finally coming to Smash.
And people have been demanding they come to Smash for a while, haven't they?
Yeah, it's one of the most popular characters in one in Smash, next to like Superman and Goku. Which I can confidently say, since both those characters have their own fighting games now, are not coming to Smash.
Yeah, I do think it's awesome though that we're getting more Smash competitors, because they did say that there was at least a couple of other fighter packs to come out. Recently, we had gotten Piranha Plant, we had gotten Joker, and I want to say there was one more character, but I can't really think of who it was.
I don't think there was, because they announced that there would be at least 5 fighter packs. So we got Piranha Plant, we got Joker, we're getting the Hero, and we're getting Banjo and Kazooie, which I think leaves one more.
I honestly can't wait to figure out who that last character is. I seriously hope it's Cuphead, though, because a lot of people might disagree with me on it, but I really feel like Cuphead deserves a spot in Smash Brothers.
And see, I think he could do well in Smash. I'm just concerned about the art style they'd render him in, because if they do the entire 3D fighter thing, I think it would become the stuff of nightmares.
I don't know. I think they could pull it off pretty well. I don't think they would just slap like stickers of eyeballs onto a cup or anything. They'd probably try and make it look a bit better.
I still say they could probably have him just in there as a 2D character fighting in a 3D world.
Like Mr. Game & Watch?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that could work. That could work. Now, before we get to this last topic, because there's another Zelda game in the works that we're going to talk about, but I also wanted to talk about Ultimate Alliance 3, the third in the series that is coming to the Nintendo Switch. Now, of course, it's your run-of-the-mill Ultimate Alliance game. There's going to be a huge roster of characters, including some that I'm not really too familiar with. We also have new additions. Two clear examples are Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen, which were only recently introduced during the Spider-Verse comic series. We also have this one character that I'm not really too familiar with. She had 2 rifles on her backs.
Yeah, I couldn't recognize her either. Long blonde hair, wore a white coat, 2 rifles on her back. I didn't recognize her.
This is also going to be a Thanos story because, of course, it's a Thanos story. We kind of have Infinity War. We kind of have that thing going on where everything's going to be Thanos for a good minute.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I mean, the subtitle of the game is called The Black Order, so it looks like they're going to be putting more of an emphasis on the minions of Thanos than the films did. And it also looks like the Thanos they're using character-wise to the movie Thanos we got.
Yeah, way more evil. His only philosophy is that he just wants to get Lady Death to fall in love with him. Nothing about balance in the universe or anything like that.
There's no deeper altruism to his evil goals. He's just evil for evil.
Yeah. As far as gameplay mechanics go, I'm kind of underwhelmed. It is literally the cut and copy version of Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2.
I mean, do we really need it to be much more than that? I mean, if they're selling a sequel to Ultimate Alliance, I think if they just make it, the gameplay from Ultimate Alliance just with new characters and graphical upgrades, I think that's okay.
I mean, I think we kind of did deserve a little bit of an upgrade at least. At least make it to where it doesn't just look like top down with little circles and an arrow around every single character or something like that. Graphics wise, it looks great, of course. It is an Ultimate Alliance game and everything, and the story looks interesting enough. It's just the gameplay itself just isn't anything new. And I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be anything new, but I kind of just wish that it was. So let's talk about our last little game that came out at Nintendo's Expo, and then we'll wrap up this show. Supposedly, we haven't gotten an official title yet, but it was announced at the end of the trailer that a sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development.
It's sort of like when they announced Metroid Prime 4 is in development. Except this time we got an entire sort of cutscene trailer for it. We see Link and Zelda descending into a cave. Zelda got a haircut since the last game, which is nice. Following this sort of trail of green floaty bits that are going down to a mummified corpse that when enough green floaty bits get there, it also seems to merge with these dark red clouds and brings the skeleton or mummy back to life. Also, at one point, Hyrule Castle starts ascending into the sky. It's hard to tell if it's floating or if it's being lifted by something. And it does give us this overview of the land that makes it look exactly like the Breath of the Wild. So it looks like it will be a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, and it even said right after at the end of the trailer, it said a sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development. Now, not much information has been given to us aside from that, though. It has been heavily rumored that the sequel to Breath of the Wild is supposed to be much darker than Majora's Mask. Now, that is a very bold statement to make, because Majora's Mask
was dark.
Oh my god, it was like the darkest Legend of Zelda game so far. So to hear them say that they're going to try and be even darker than Majora's Mask, it's just, I'm intrigued. I'm very, very intrigued to see what exactly is going to happen with this game, But aside from that, ladies and gentlemen, that was E3 2019 and stuff that we picked. Brian, what were your thoughts on this year's E3?
This year's was a bit lackluster, but that's kind of to be expected. It's the E3 before a new console generation starts. I'm guessing, yeah, there weren't really a lot of announcements this year. I'm guessing next year we'll start getting a lot of announcements. We'll probably get, an official name for Project Scarlet, a bunch of games that are coming out on Scarlet. Next year will probably be a lot more jam-packed. But I think it's also a sign that E3 is sort of becoming less relevant now because Sony wasn't there. Nintendo stopped doing press conferences. EA didn't do a press conference. And I think it's sort of a sign that E3 may just not be relevant to video game marketing anymore because that's really what it is. It's a big marketing event, and that's fine. But with so many, companies going off and doing their own, live streams and their own announcement schedule, they don't really have to schedule around E3 anymore to announce things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a few years, maybe E3 won't be around anymore. And that'll be sad, I think. It'll be sad.
Honestly, I think it'd be a good thing once E3 is finally gone.
Mm-hmm.
This year's E3, I admit, it was pretty lackluster. However, at the same time, it had nowhere near as much controversy as last year's E3 had. Lots of stuff, had so much outrage.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about the history of E3, E3 was originally created because before its creation, video game companies could not get their games really promoted at all.
Yeah.
They'd go to other expos to try and show off their games, and they'd have teeny tiny little tents all the way at the end. People would barely even come over and check their stuff out. So E3 was created so that way they can try and get themselves promoted to people. And it's been a huge success so far. Lots of companies have been able to get their really great games out there for the whole world to see. And when I heard that there were these companies that were starting to branch off from E3, I kind of feel like we're hitting the right point for them to jump off of E3. Because these game companies have finally reached that point where they can get enough hype doing their own presentation, their own way, their own style with as much time as they want instead of having to stick to what was originally keeping them up. We've now reached a spot where they can keep themselves popular. So, I mean, if E3 does disappear in the future, I have a feeling it's because we're going to have way better expos to follow up with afterwards.
Yeah, because Sony has their new State of Play thing. Xbox has their Xbox Daily or Xbox Weekly. It's not as good, but they also had the Xbox Game Conference in Mexico City this year, which was their own little mini E3. There are things like Gamescom and QuakeCon.
EA Play.
Yeah, EA Play. It's all these companies have started doing their own thing, less centralized around E3.
Yeah, which is a pretty good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that being said, that is the end of today's episode of the Phone Booth here on The Voice of San Joaquin. My name is Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez.
Bye.
Be sure to tune in every Saturday from 1 to 2 here on The Voice of San Joaquin, where we cover anything pop culture related. From movies to television to video games to comic books, you name it, we do our very best to cover it. Is there a news topic or a movie trailer out there that you want us to talk about in the next episode? Please let us know in the comments below. We'll be sure to get right back to your comment, and we'll have it jotted down on our agenda. Now with that being said, have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.